Look at this image. These are not just lights. These are concentrations of money, of ambition, of life. Now watch what happens when I remove the borders. When we strip away the lines we drew on maps, we are left with the raw truth. Geography is fate, and geopolitics is the chess game played on this board. In the next hour, we are going to rewire the way you see the world. You will stop seeing countries as simple boxes on a map and start seeing them as living organisms, hungry for resources, constrained by mountains, terrified of their neighbors, and constantly maneuvering for survival. By the end of this video, you will understand why Russia fights for a flat plain in Ukraine, why China is building islands in the South China Sea, and why the United States maintains 800 military bases around the world. You will understand why geopolitics matters, because if you do not understand the board, you are simply a piece being moved on it. Before we go any further, we need to define our terms. Most people confuse geopolitics with international news. They think reading the headlines makes them geopolitically literate. It does not. Politics is who gets what, when, and how within a system. Geopolitics is what happens when there is no system, when the rules break down, and power is the only language spoken. The word geopolitics comes from two roots: geo, meaning earth or geography, and politics, meaning the affairs of the state. Put simply, geopolitics is the study of how geography, location, resources, terrain, climate, shapes the political and military decisions of nations. It asks three questions. 1. What do you have? Resources, land, population. 2. Where are you? Proximity to allies, enemies, choke points. 3. What stands in your way? Mountains, oceans, rival powers. A political scientist cares about elections and ideologies. A geopolitician cares about the Dardanelles Strait. They care about the Himalayan mountain range. They care about the fact that 90% of the world's trade moves by sea, and that there are only a handful of narrow passages, choke points, where that trade can be blocked. If you understand geopolitics, you stop being surprised by war. You start seeing it as inevitable given the constraints of geography. Every geopolitical analysis rests on three pillars. Let's build them together. Pillar 1. Geography. Geography is not just about where a country is. It is about what that land does to the people who live on it. Consider Russia. Western Russia is not protected by mountains or oceans. It is a vast, open plain, the Eurasian steppe. For centuries, invaders have poured across this plain: the Mongols, Napoleon, Hitler. Because of this geography, Russia developed a specific psychological trait, a deep existential paranoia about buffer zones. When NATO expands eastward, a political scientist sees democratic enlargement. A geopolitician sees the same pattern that led the Mongols to Moscow. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not fundamentally about ideology. It is about the fact that flat land offers no protection. Russia is fighting to create distance between its major cities and potential adversaries. Now compare that to the United States. The United States is protected by two vast oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, and bordered by weak, friendly neighbors to the north and south. This geography allowed the United States to develop a different psychology, a belief in security, a tendency toward interventionism when it chooses, but a fundamental safety that Europe and Asia do not enjoy. Geography explains why America builds a navy and Russia builds a land army. It explains everything. Pillar 2. Resources. A nation cannot project power if it cannot feed its people or fuel its military. Resources are the fuel of power. The Middle East is not valuable because of its culture or its history, though both are rich. It is valuable because for a century, the global economy ran on the oil buried beneath its sand. The United States did not deploy carrier strike groups to the Persian Gulf to ensure the free flow of oil, because without that oil, the global economy and America's allies would collapse. Today, the new resource is critical minerals, cobalt, lithium, rare earth elements. If you want to build electric vehicles, solar panels, or smartphones, you need these materials, and the largest deposits are in the Democratic Republic of Congo and controlled in large part by China. Whoever controls the resources of the future will write the rules of the future. That is not politics, that is geopolitics. Pillar 3. Power projection. Having resources and favorable geography means nothing if you cannot project force. Power projection is the ability to influence events beyond your borders. The United States maintains over 800 military bases outside its own borders. No empire in human history has achieved this level of global presence. These bases are not randomly placed. They sit on the choke points: Guam in the Pacific, Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, Ramstein in Germany. From these bases, the U.S. Navy controls the world's sea lanes, and control of the sea lanes means control of global trade. China understands this. That is why they are building artificial islands in the South China Sea to project power into waters that have historically been dominated by the United States. Power projection is expensive, but without it, you are a regional power, not a global one. To understand modern geopolitics, we have to go back to 1904. That year, a British geographer named Halford Mackinder presented a theory that would shape the next century of conflict. Mackinder divided the world into 3 parts: the world island, Eurasia and Africa combined, the largest landmass on Earth; the heartland, the interior of Eurasia, from Eastern Europe through Siberia, much of modern-day Russia and Central Asia; and the rimland, the coastal fringes of Eurasia, Western Europe, the Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, China. Mackinder argued that the power that controlled the heartland, the vast resource-rich interior of Eurasia, would ultimately dominate the world. Why? Because the heartland was impenetrable by sea, and its resources could fuel a land-based empire that no maritime power could defeat. This theory terrified British and American strategists throughout the 20th century. It explained why Nazi Germany's push into Russia was the central front of World War II. It explained why the Cold War was fought over Eastern Europe. Mackinder's theory predicted that the United States, as a maritime power, would spend the next 70 years containing the heartland power, first the Soviet Union, and now, arguably, Russia and China. Mackinder was not a prophet, but his framework remains useful. Look at the war in Ukraine. Ukraine sits exactly on the pivot point Mackinder identified, the gateway to the heartland. That is not a coincidence. That is geography expressing itself. While Mackinder focused on land, the reality of global power has always been shaped by the sea. 90% of global trade travels by water, and the sea has bottlenecks. There are 5 choke points that every geopolitics analyst memorizes. If you control these, you control global trade. The first is the Strait of Hormuz. Located between Iran and Oman, 20% of the world's petroleum passes through this narrow strait. Iran has threatened to close it repeatedly. If that strait closes, global oil prices triple within a week. The second is the Strait of Malacca. 40% of global trade, including most of China's energy imports, passes through this strait between Malaysia and Indonesia. This is China's greatest vulnerability. If a hostile power ever blockaded the Strait of Malacca, China's economy would grind to a halt. This is why China is investing billions in the Belt and Road Initiative to create overland alternatives. The third is the Suez Canal. In 2021, one container ship, the Ever Given, got stuck in the Suez Canal for 6 days. It held up an estimated $9 billion a day in trade. The Suez connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, and it is the fastest route between Europe and Asia. Egypt controls it. Egypt's political stability matters to the entire global economy. The fourth is the Panama Canal. This connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, allowing ships to avoid the treacherous voyage around Cape Horn. The United States built it, controlled it for decades, and remains its most important user. The fifth is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Located between Yemen and Djibouti, this strait connects the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. It is the southern entrance to the Suez Canal.